John Mozeliak hints at more changes coming for the Cardinals, plus a reaction to Miles Mikolas' recent struggles in 2024. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer coming at you on Monday evening, September 9th, 2024. Over the weekend, the Cardinals dropped 2 of 3 to the Mariners. It's their first series loss in about 3 weeks, but it's just something that at this point in the calendar, we know the Cardinals can ill afford to have. And Sunday's loss came as a pretty lopsided one, with the Cardinals dropping it 10-4 to the Mariners in a game started by Miles Mikolas. And it's just been a season for Mikolas that Cardinals fans just did not want to see. But I think a lot of folks were maybe a little fearful that this is the type of production the Cardinals might get from Mikolas this season after he regressed in 2023 and just didn't seem to be quite the same guy as he was in the All-Star 2022 campaign. Made a ton of starts, had the 200 innings last year, but ERA ballooned. He led the league in hits and earned runs allowed. Just one of those seasons for Mikolas that wasn't particularly strong. And then you come back this season, you're hoping to see maybe a more refreshed version of him in his age 35 campaign. It's been even worse. A 5.55 ERA now is where Mikolas is on the season. And knowing that contract runs through 2025 and that money is already on the books, I guess it's a question of what the Cardinals are going to ultimately want to do with Mikolas in his contract in that rotation spot, because it's one that you kind of have filed away and written in pencil as well. Miles Mikolas is going to be in there because they're paying him to be. And with all the discussion about the payroll circumstances for the Cardinals for 2025 and the notion that maybe they're not going to want to expand the payroll beyond certainly what it was this year and may even take away a little bit compared to the money that was spent in 2024, it would stand to reason that Mikolas' spot could be accounted for regardless almost of the performance. But I think it's kind of getting to a point where, look, even if you're going to do it under a lesser payroll next year, if you're the Cardinals, you look at that Mikolas spot and say, are the Cardinals just kind of punting on a rotation spot if they put Mikolas back in there looking the way that he's looking right now? A 5.55 ERA, I mean, that's just not competitive. And even if you're a team that does have to kind of trim the payroll a little bit and maybe go in a direction of leaning on internal options, that spot, I just think if you had a camp competition and said, look, guy with a 5.5 ERA goes up against some of these minor leaguers, if contract were not the determining factor of that such competition, how would it play out? Like, I just don't know if the Cardinals are in a spot where they're going to be considerate of, hey, the money is the money and we're paying it either way. Let's go ahead and put the best product on the field and go into a spring where Miles Mikolas sort of has to almost earn his spot, or if it even gets that far along, if the Cardinals would look to trade him and eat money to move the contract, if he's been one of the least effective starters in baseball of the full-time starters across the league this year. So, look, this is not what anybody wanted to see for him in this season, but it's where he is at this point. And after the game on Sunday, Ollie Marmol obviously had to answer questions about the performance by Mikolas, and we heard, and I'll play the audio for you courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest, but we kind of heard a similar story to what we have heard Ollie Marmol say in the past when it comes to Miles Mikolas and the notion of, look, he's a pitch-to-contact guy, and in a situation where the contact is hard contact and it finds a hole in another, then, these are going to be the types of days that he has. But it's now kind of gone from day to day, and you have a couple of outings like this throughout a year to, well, Mikolas is getting hit hard more often than not, and that has turned into an ERA of 5.5 following a season where he was close to 5 with last year's ERA. So it's sort of been trending in the wrong direction for Miles Mikolas, and I know a lot of Cardinals fans are disappointed in the outcomes and the production that the Cardinals have gotten from him. But as we think toward next season, be very interested to see how the Cardinals might end up viewing this situation. Let's hear from Ollie Marmol. Again, this is courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest after a tough outing in which Mikolas didn't get through 3 innings and gave up, quite a few runs.
Yeah, we talked about that quite a bit. He's a strike thrower. There's days he's going to get hit, and there's days those are going to be at people. Just didn't have the ability to execute and get some of his pitches glove side the way he wanted to, and they ran back over the plate and they hit it hard. They didn't miss a whole lot. They took some big swings and connected on quite a bit of them. So, end of the day, I mean, they beat him.
And there is not much else to say about the Miles Mikolas outing from Sunday, and really that's been the story of his season. And look, I mean, you might, I saw some commentary, and look, I think the discerning and the comprehension sometimes from folks on social media is pretty poor. When you look at the comments below the video there that I played the audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest, and people are saying, oh my gosh, Ollie, Ollie, I can't believe he said this, and how does Ollie think that this was, like, if you listen to what he said, you're not really going to hear a manager be more critical than that of a player that's on his team. Like, at the end of the day, they beat him. They hit the ball really hard against him, and they beat him. We've talked about this. He's a strike thrower, and sometimes those strikes are going to get hit hard, and if it's not at people, they're going to score a lot of runs. Like, he basically is saying, like, the guy was not, he didn't have the stuff to be able to compete, to be able to win. And that's about as blunt as it's going to get. That's not a compliment to Miles Mikolas. It's very much the opposite in terms of the way that he's performing this season. And look, we've seen very good versions of Miles Mikolas, but even in those years, heavily relying on pitch to contact. And so you got to be able to miss the barrel. And his stuff, I don't think, has the sharpness at this stage of his career to miss the barrel. And so we're seeing the results that we're seeing from Miles Mikolas. If that's your reaction on the 8th of September in 2024, I'm not sure, money aside, what you're going to reasonably expect Miles Mikolas to be in 2025. This may be one where the Cardinals have to recognize the sunk cost. If they don't think Mikolas is one of their best 5 starters, I don't think they should put him out there next year. Even if that just means eating the money, which is very interesting because you might say the same thing about Steven Matz. Those are 2 contracts that are really not looking too great right now for the Cardinals in terms of having reliability in a rotation and the money they're spending on that. Now, Steven Matz came out and threw 4 innings of relief behind Mikolas in that game on Sunday, gave up 2 runs, both earned, 2 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. He was decidedly fine. Did give up 1 home run. Mikolas gave up 1 home run. But like I think you would look at him in a very similar vein and say, is Steven Matz somebody that despite the $11 million you still owe him, that you really are eager to put into your rotation next year? I don't know what the Cardinals are going to do. They have multiple guys that are kind of in this spot. You have Kyle Gibson, who pitched really well in the 1 win the Cardinals got in the series on Saturday. Gibby didn't get the win himself because the runs came later via a Pedro Pajes home run. But do you bring Gibby back under a contract of similar dollar amount? What's the Lance Lynn status going to look like? They'll see him on Wednesday, I believe, with Palante going Tuesday. Still have to figure out a lot about next year's rotation, and there's probably, 7, 8 candidates, maybe even more that you could consider. They could go the route of, hey, anybody under an option, just decide to not bring him back and save the money there. Decide between Mikolas and Matz. Maybe you eat the contract of one, but you try to pitch the other every 5th day. But you come into spring with guys like McGreevy and Graceffo and company, whoever that could be from the internal grouping, competing for a spot. Like maybe that's the way that the Cardinals end up going with it. I don't know that there's a perfect answer and one that's going to be satisfactory to Cardinals fans, especially because I think, there's going to be a disappointment amongst the fan base for the notion that they're not necessarily going to be as aggressive as I think people are going to want them to be with filling out the top-notch rotation and doing whatever it takes to get that on day 1 of 2025. I think you could be looking at a case where Sonny's going to be in there, Eric Fetty's going to be in there, and I really think Andre Palante deserves a shot. Beyond that, you could look at a group of 4 or 5 players that are all internal options. Granted, Lynn and Gibson would technically need to be picked up on their options, but there is the contractual language to do that. And how do the Cardinals want to approach it? How much money do they want to save on the payroll next year? Where does a guy like Paul Goldschmidt fit into that, where he's come on strong as of late, has a 712 OPS now for the season, and is he somebody that the Cardinals are going to want to bring back? What would that cost? How does that bake into and impact the decisions they might make in terms of the money they have to spend in the rotation? I would say, look, don't necessarily jump into a free agent contract for a starting pitcher if you are considerate of the notion that the last few haven't really worked out. Obviously, Mikolas wasn't a free agent contract, and I'm talking about the last few long ones. Like Steven Matz is one that's still in the back of your mind that you made a commitment on for 4 years, and if you dig into that same tier of free agent pitcher 4 years down the road, is that going to result in something similar? Are you going to be having buyer's remorse on that guy a couple of years down the line? I don't think the Cardinals organizationally are in a position to where they want to do that again with the frequency that they have had to in the past few years. It would be nice if they could develop a couple of guys that could help, ease the burden a little bit on what it looks like to go out and build a rotation through free agency and sometimes via trade. So I'm not sure what it's going to end up being, but that's certainly a topic of conversation in a situation that I think we're going to continue to have to monitor. It's going to be one of the most interesting stories of the offseason, along with the Goldie thing, along with just generally, obviously, what's going to happen at a higher level than just the roster itself in terms of the front office and the direction that the organization is going to go there. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and shift gears to the other topic I wanted to talk about tonight. Is we got, again, it seems to be that Tom Ackerman's getting all the scoops here, the director for KMOX, who had John Mozeliak on for their weekly visit, as they do on every Sunday for their show, Sports on a Sunday Morning. And, of course, with the retirement of the director of player development, Gary LaRocque, that was announced within the past week, Tom Ackerman asked John Mozeliak about that, and Mo had some interesting comments. Not necessarily comments that were altogether surprising, but certainly that's somebody who has been within the organization in a prominent role since 2008, and that overlaps the tenure of John Mozeliak running the team. So to think about the ways the Cardinals had won in the development game for so long during Mo's tenure, and that has sort of gone by the wayside, and we have seen the Cardinals maybe fall behind a little bit in that category. The notion of having the person who's been in charge now retiring, does that change the outlook and change the direction maybe that the Cardinals are going to look to go with some of these opportunities and how they look to fill them from potentially external options? So there was some conversation about that within this clip I'll play from you, courtesy of KMOX and their show with Tom Ackerman, Sports on a Sunday Morning, where they were actually talking about the Cardinals Hall of Fame induction stuff that happened this weekend, and Dave Duncan being a real highlight of that. But it sort of led to this question then from Tom Ackerman that you'll hear about kind of getting the organization back to the days where you see all those guys in red jackets and you see the collection of talented individuals who have sort of helped build the Cardinals into what the Cardinals are known to be as an organization and a franchise and all of those great things, and kind of then understanding and juxtaposing that to the notion that, well, right now the Cardinals are not where they want to be. And that led to a pretty interesting answer from Mo, where clearly there's been some reflection that has gone on, and the notion of change is something that is needed within the org. So I'll play the question from Tom Ackerman for you, and then you can hear from John Mozeliak for his thoughts on exactly what all that might entail, courtesy of KMOX.
And I know you want that. You know, you look at that history, and you remember when the Cardinals were the envy of Major League Baseball. You want that again. It's finding the right mix of players to grow within your organization, finding free agents that you can add to that list. Do you feel that also, that you feel the responsibility when you see the greatness in the past, that this edition you wish could get to that and next year?
Well, I think you're always striving to find that right recipe. I think the real question becomes, like, what's that look like and what does that mean? And so, you know, one of the things that I feel like in the game of baseball, as you look at sort of the economics of what's happening in our industry, there are the mid to small market teams that you have to get the draft and player development right. You just have to truly be successful in this league. You can't have many misses on your draft picks. And when you have draft picks, you got to be able to squeeze the most juice out of that as possible to really be successful. And so as I think about the future for the organization, obviously with Gary LaRocque announcing his retirement, you know, there's going to be some changes. And I think is great a job as Gary did. I think it's going to be a nice opportunity to welcome some change. And so I certainly look forward to the next few months and to see where we end up and what that leadership looks like. But, you know, I definitely feel like we do have to have some changes from within because, you know, we're not where we need to be and we need to get back there.
So kind of interesting there from Cardinals president of the baseball operations, John Mozeliak, talking with Tom Ackerman on KMOX's Sports on a Sunday Morning show. Basically, I mean, Tom does a great job. He didn't ask Mo, you know, what are you going to do? You're going to make some changes. He kind of said, look, compare all that greatness that you saw over the weekend, and you want to get the Cardinals back to that, right? And so that was a very well-done transition there by Tom. And Mo answered the question in a way that, like, he added to it and said, look, we know there needs to be changes to get back where we want to be, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of months. And, hey, that Gary LaRocque thing happened, and that's we thank him for the great job he did, but also this is an opportunity to maybe make some changes. And then it was interesting, the follow-up that Tom asked him, basically pertaining to, hey, could some of those changes be external in nature as the Cardinals maybe look to shift their direction a little bit? Here's what John Mozeliak had to say there.
Do you also changes from within for sure? Do you want to look outside? Do you want to, when the time is right, to poke around and see which teams are doing it right, which teams are doing it great, which teams are being innovative, and perhaps taking some of those people and putting them in the mix?
Yeah, to give you the Cliff Note version. I mean, that's already been done.
Yeah.
It's about beginning the process of the interviewing and getting that moving, and hopefully within the next couple of months we have leadership in place, and then we can just keep moving forward.
So interesting comments for sure from John Mozeliak, and interesting to hear him talk about leadership as well, because he obviously is the leadership of the organization, but we know that that's not going to be the case for all too much longer, even if he sees his contract through to 2025 like we expect him to do. It sounds like when he says leadership, I don't think that just necessarily means player development. I think he's talking about organizational hierarchy, and he could very well have a hand, and a strong hand. I expect that he probably will, in how the transition goes down and who ends up not only replacing him, but sort of replacing the entire leadership group, or supplementing the leadership group and having others come in with different roles. It's going to be very, very interesting to see, and how much of those changes happen prior to 2025 or set up what it could be after 2025 is going to be fascinating to watch unfold. But that's kind of where the Cardinals are at right now. I think you can expect a pretty good amount of change, and then it's just going to depend on exactly what they're going to do roster-wise, rotation-wise, I think is a big question. But, hey, if they don't bring Goldie back, do they try to replace him? Do they go outside and do everything that they can to bring in additional help offensively? Do they replace some of the guys that we thought coming into this year were going to be long-term fixtures for the team, but they haven't performed, and so the Cardinals might look to trade somebody? I mean, I think there is a number of things that could happen with this Cardinals team, and we'll definitely be interested in seeing kind of the way that it all plays out. But that's kind of my thoughts for today, trying to keep it brief, but make sure I can check in with you guys. I know it's been a little bit hit and miss here recently, as let's be honest, the interest in what's going on around the Cardinals has dwindled, but I fully expect September to have some moments within it that we're going to continue to bring you B-Shape Daily. And honestly, I think we'll be even closer to everyday full-length podcast when we get into the offseason and can actually start to dive in beyond just speculation on some of the stuff that's going to be happening this winter. So stick with the channel here. Make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss anything coming up this offseason for the Cardinals. I wish we weren't talking offseason on the 9th of September, but it's kind of the way that things are leaning with where the standings are for the Cardinals. Anything can happen. They could definitely go on a run, but it sort of feels like we're just waiting for this season to drain down. So let me know if that's the way you feel, if you see a run in the Cardinals, or if you've kind of shifted your attention as well to 2025. We'll continue to stay on top of all things Cardinals that are pertinent, though, here on the channel. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys as always, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Shape Daily. Peace.